Hello, boys and girls. I want to welcome you to the latest Trainers Talk. I have a very special guest, Mr. Duane Hoff. Duane was a former executive at Best Buy. He is the owner of Fantesca Winery here in Spring Mountain in St. Helena in California. He's also on the X Prize Innovation Board, which is pretty cool, and we'll talk about that. And he also has a lovely family that I get to train multiple days a week. So, Duane, thank you for joining.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is very cool to kind of, I think we've been training for almost, how many years now?
We've been training for like 17 years.
Yeah, it's 2007.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so it's not quite, yeah.
About like almost 14.
14 years.
14 years. And it's been pretty interesting because when we first started training, you moved from Minnesota, somewhat similar time when I moved out from Atlanta.
Yeah.
And prior to that, you were kind of more into, you did more powerlifting.
Yeah. So Susan and I, Susan's really, her fitness journey didn't start until we were getting ready to kind of make the move out here.
Yeah.
And so I used to lift at a gym, kind of an industrial gym in Minnesota that was hockey players in the off season,
Yeah.
guys trying to get into the NFL, and then, just muscle heads, guys that were just power lifters.
Yeah.
And when we moved out here, I'll never forget one of the things that happened was we moved out here and we're looking for a gym out here, and there was a gym that was really dirty back then,
Yeah.
kind of in the area, and Susan was like, no, that's not going to work for me. So the other option was Solage, which was really a spa.
Yeah.
And so I'm like going, whoa, this is going to be so different. And we started training together, and one of the first things you had me do was, I'm like, okay, well, I'm telling you how much I can bench and how much I can squat, and you're like, can you stand on one leg and bend over and pick up a water bottle? And I tried to do it and fell over. And so it's like, oh, you called it. It's like you have strength, but you don't have functional strength. You don't have good core balance and those things.
Yeah. So it was interesting, and it's so much that I've learned from training you because of the power and the strength that you do have. We've been able to use it for sure. But let's take a step back and go kind of in the beginning. How did you grow up? Where did you grow up? Tell me a little bit about that story.
Yeah, so I am one of the luckiest people on the planet. I grew up in an idyllic family in northern Minnesota in a little agriculture community called Crookston, Minnesota.
Yeah.
And my dad was the most interesting combination. My dad grew up on a farm, and he wanted me to have those values.
Yeah.
So we had 100 head of sheep.
Yeah.
And my dad's daytime job was he was a college professor at the university there in Crookston.
Yeah.
And it was more of an ag school. It catered towards kids that were going to have a career in agriculture. And then on weekends, my dad flew jets for the National Guard.
Oh,
and
wow.
so if you remember, Top Gun, there's Goose and Maverick.
Yeah.
My dad was Goose.
Oh, cool.
And he flew supersonic jets with live nuclear warheads under the wings, because Fargo to Moscow is a lot closer than any place else in the United States. And so my dad was this incredible combination of farmer, teacher, fighter pilot.
Yeah. So when you, after college, during college, you met the love of your life, and tell me how that went down. How are you able to? I think what I'll kind of lead you a little bit is, Susan, who I've interviewed before, and we started training all at the same time. She grew up in Minneapolis kind of area, right? Is that?
Yeah.
And so you were the country boy, and you guys tell me how you met, and tell me that story of how you guys finally came together and got married.
So at University of Minnesota, they had the nation's largest student-run fundraiser was something called Campus Carney. And it was everybody bought tickets to attend it, which is where the money came from, the donations came from. But what it was, once you got inside the field house, was every fraternity and there was a fraternity and sorority paired together. They had a band and a dance line. and then it was competitive.
Yeah.
And so we would practice with the dance line and the band every night for basically a month before this event. And so she was in my fraternity house right in front of me dancing.
Yeah.
And I was the lead singer. And so I could just wear her down,
Yeah.
just wear her down. And she was a safe flirt because ironically, she had been long distance dating my best friend's brother.
Yeah.
And so, we were a safe flirt because there's a code.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then as we were doing the show and the competition and stuff, we were drinking kind of between sets and everything, and all of a sudden the inhibitions come down, and it's like, I think I'm gonna kiss this girl, and you kind of lose that inhibition, and it's like, I still feel bad for my best friend's brother because he really missed out.
He did. He did. Yeah. That's funny. And then I think what was interesting is the story. I mean, there's so many stories. So over 13 years, there's a lot. We have a lot of stories.
You got a minute or two of rest between sets. You
Exactly.
hear pretty much everything that's going on.
But I think one of the stories I do like is that first time Susan is the city girl who got the idea. Oh, you grew up you're a farm boy. And like, what was that like when her coming up and meeting your family and kind of seeing like, oh, this is like,
you're inviting somebody from a different world into your world, and the crossover for both of us was pretty interesting. And the first time she came up, to visit my family, my dad was a teacher, right? So in the summertime we would bale hay, we would take care of the livestock, but my dad also had a grain bin business. So we would erect grain bins. We'd pour concrete and hang steel for grain bins. And so Susan was coming up to see me, and somebody had to drive to Watertown, South Dakota, pick up 3 or 4 grain bins and drive them back to northern Minnesota, it's like 700 miles round trip.
Oh.
And my dad sent me with just enough time to get to South Dakota, turn around and come back and meet Susan when she came up.
Yeah.
And we ran into rain, so we had to drive 30 miles an hour instead of 60 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And so she spent the first 3 hours of meeting my family alone at the kitchen table with my parents. And I'm shocked I was able to actually keep her as a girlfriend after that.
But no, I think that shows like you guys really had an honest understanding of where you guys came from, and then later, I'm kind of skipping ahead, but tell me a little bit about your Best Buy experience working there, working your way up, becoming an executive there. Tell me about that kind of experience there.
So, a big part of the story is that Susan's family founded Best Buy.
Yeah.
And so, and for 20 years, Best Buy was 4 stores. It was called Sound of Music. They sold stereos, guitars, and sheet music.
Yeah.
And I met Susan in 1980. I met Susan in 1985, and so they had just converted from Sound of Music to Best Buy. They still only had 4 locations, and 3 of the locations were small, and 1 location was a more substantial store. And they had 4 stores when we met. We dated for 3 years before we got married, and in those 3 years, the 4 stores grew to 12 stores.
Wow.
When we got married, every store manager, all 12 of them, were at our wedding.
Oh wow! Yeah.
And so Susan had started to work for Best Buy right out of college. I went and worked for a real company in downtown St. Paul. I worked for an insurance company and did marketing for an insurance company. Wore a suit and tie to work every day while she went to this crazy stereo place. And it's a 100-year-old insurance company. So, you want to take an hour and a half for lunch and go work out? Fine, go take an hour and a half for lunch. Yeah. It's Friday at 2 o'clock. We can't have a meeting. Everybody's got to go home. Yeah. And so that was kind of the environment of the 100-year-old insurance company.
Yeah.
Whereas she was at a startup.
Yeah.
And so she loved it, and she was, constantly, on the move trying to, figure things out. Well, in the preceding 3 years after we got married, the 12 stores had grown to 50 stores.
Yeah.
And you could see that there was you could see there was a path.
Yeah.
And actually, an interesting story. heavy snow day. It was really snowing, and one of our neighbors was one of the vice presidents of the company.
Yeah.
And he called and volunteered and said, "Hey, there's no sense in both of us driving. I'll take Susan. Susan, I'll drive in and drive us both into work."
Yeah.
So when they drove back home, we invited him in for a cup of coffee, and his name was George Fouts. George was the vice president for half the company, which meant he had 25 stores under his direction, which is an incredible responsibility. If you think about 25 stores,
that's incredible.
It's a massive amount of responsibility.
Yeah.
And he just we were having a polite conversation, and I didn't realize he was quizzing me, because he's just asking questions. He's like, "How do you like work? What do you like about it? What do you wish you could do differently?" And I'm like, "Well, it's really hidebound. I wish they would be a little quicker. I wish they were more aggressive at figuring out new products for the customer."
Yeah.
And he just shook his head. And I said, "What?" He goes, "You're an idiot." And I was like, "Okay." And he said, "Listen, I don't know if Best Buy is going to make it or not, but you'll learn more at Best Buy in the next 3 years than you will in the next 10 where you are."
Yeah.
And so I said, "Well, I don't want to work for my father-in-law."
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, then come work for me, and I'll be a buffer between you and your father-in-law."
Yeah.
And so that's what that really means, though, is that you have to start as an assistant manager in one of the stores.
Yeah.
And then you work from being an assistant manager to being a manager.
Yep.
From being a manager to being a general manager. From being a general manager to being a district manager to a regional manager to being a vice president.
Yeah.
And so I was way, 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 way down the food chain, and took a 50% pay cut to leave the insurance company and come to work for Best Buy.
Yeah.
And what I didn't realize, and I think other people around me realized, was that ultimately my career would probably not, because I had a marketing background, so my career probably wasn't going to be in retail execution. It was probably going to be in marketing at corporate. But what they all wisely realized was that the experience of being in the store, solving problems for customers as a manager, solving problems for customers on the floor, invaluable experience.
Oh, totally.
Invaluable experience. So that really guided the rest of my career at Best Buy.
Yeah.
And like you have one of the things you have to do when you have a category as a merchant is you have an assortment, right? Which of these things am I going to commit to putting on the shelf?
Totally.
And how many of them am I going to sell? So the temptation is, let's get a conference room and we'll do it in the conference room.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I took the whole team, drug them down to a store, and we stood in front of the display with the products we were gonna buy, not what was already for sale, but what we were gonna buy.
Yeah.
This is what it will look like for the customer.
Yeah.
How is that customer gonna convince themselves to spend $100 more on this TV than this TV?
Yeah.
And you needed to see it like a customer would see it. And I was very blessed. I had a situation where I was the new guy that came in as an assistant buyer, so I got promoted. I got promoted into being an assistant manager in the store, and an assistant buyer position opened up in the corporate office.
Yeah.
And so, because of my marketing background, I jumped on that and tried to get that assistant buyer position. And I was fortunate enough to get hired to do that. And what was interesting was I was new, and so they were hiring a new merchandise manager over all of audio. So the challenge, so I came in under audio, but I was the new guy. And so the new guy working for the new guy that's going to be a disaster, right?
Yeah.
So they flipped me with a guy who had 10 years experience working for the company. And so now I'm the new guy working for somebody experienced, right?
Gotcha.
So my boss got screwed. My boss got screwed.
Yeah.
My boss is like, I get the new guy, and he's the son-in-law of the founder. Like, thanks a ton.
Yeah.
And so his name was Tom Mills, and Tom was too busy to even spend any time with me for the first month I was there. The second month I was there, he comes up to me and he goes, book yourself onto this flight. We're going to Dallas on this day. We're going to go visit some stores, and then we'll come back like 4 days later.
Yeah.
I had no idea. We get out there and we're walking through competitors' stores, and he's asking me questions. About the second day, I realized I was getting an interview.
Yeah.
And so what Tom was trying to decide before he spent time with me to help me develop was, am I serious? Am I trainable?
Yeah.
Will I take the training, or am I just a son-in-law there you know. And so he decided that I would and was trainable. And what was really special about that was that the company was growing so fast. The faster I got skills, the more likely he would be to lose me to a different department.
Yeah.
And he didn't care. He just somebody had done this for him and he wanted to do it for me.
That's
and
cool.
the things he taught me just about putting together an assortment, pricing, simple things like let's say you've got three, I'm sorry, but like if you got three videotape, I got at the accessory category. That was one of the ones that gave me.
Yeah.
So I get the accessory category. We had 4 video head tape cleaners that were all $7.99 because they kept running out of one or the other. And so they ran out of one and then they would just plug another one in. So we had 4 items that were all the same price point.
Yeah.
You get no extra revenue out of that.
Exactly.
So, he taught me this. I got rid of 2 of them, went super deep on one and moved the other one, bought something that was a $10 price point instead of an $8 price point. Your revenue goes up, your turn speeds up. All these good things happen because you just have the common sense to do that. But he taught me how to do that.
Yeah.
And it sustained me. Every time I would get promoted to a new category, I could do those little tricks and get like a 10% improvement in performance, which gave me time to look around and actually learn the new category.
Yeah.
So you look smart, even though you just stop doing stupid shit.
Well, that's interesting because it's like finding something in the 80% that kind of, or something that's like a small change that makes a big difference. It's like trying to find the little things. I'm going to pivot to, so when you were at Best Buy and you were talking about you were able to work out an hour and a half, like when did you kind of start to get into, now you're an adult, now you're married, and when did I'm going to start to work out regularly, this is going to be my thing, give myself, from all the obvious reasons, but also the mental time for yourself?
Yeah, so the insurance company was a strange thing because it was in downtown St. Paul. It was across the street from a gorgeous YMCA, and about half the people in my department went over there every lunch hour and worked out.
Yeah.
And so that was completely acceptable. It wasn't damaging to your career. It was just, so I would go over there and play racquetball for fun and, goof around with weights, really. I mean, not serious about it. And then I got on the Best Buy bullet train. And all that went away. Young couple, 2 young children, a startup trying not to get killed by bigger competitors. So that all went away. And so probably when I come out I was probably about 35 when I kind of came up for air on that. And the kids were old enough that, if they were, you got to get your kids to the place where you can leave them alone in a room and not be worried they're going to stick their tongue in a light socket.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so the kids had gotten to that stage, and I had, growing up on a farm, I'd always been farm strong.
Yeah.
And so now I'm 35 and I'm starting to become more refrigerator shaped instead of V-shaped.
Yes, yeah.
And so, it was one of those things where it's like, okay, this doesn't match my self-image of who I am.
Yeah.
And what I realized was if I wanted to work out, I was going to have to get up at 5:30 in the morning to get to the gym, to work out, clean up, and get to the office.
Yeah.
But no one was going to stop me from getting up at 5:30 as long as my wife was willing to get the kids ready by herself.
Yeah.
And what I really had to trade for that was that hour from, 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock where I was just, watching network television or cable TV.
Yeah.
And so it's like, that's a pretty easy trade.
Yeah.
And so my wife was good enough to allow me to do that. And so then I started to work out and lift. And I just wanted to get stronger and I wanted to lose weight.
Yeah.
And so for me, that meant a combination of running and lifting.
Yeah.
And so, that's kind of what I started to get into. And so I started running and lifting, and the lifting for me was the thing because my body responded to that.
Yeah.
I was already fairly strong, and then I got stronger pretty quick.
Yeah.
And I'm compact, so just like running backs are great at squats and
Totally.
so I had a build that was good for. I could squat a ton.
Yes. Well, I mean, like we don't even. The funny thing is, I mean, like give an example of like what's a ton, because it's what, like four about.
Yeah, so I probably at the heaviest I probably was squatting like 450, 475
Yeah.
as a working set, you
Yeah.
know, for 6 reps, 8 reps.
And that is a lot of effing weight. I mean, that's a lot of effing weight. And so, it's what was interesting is that, you, as we kind of go through your training and you move out here, and we kind of come back to the story of you could do that, but the balance to be able to stand on one leg and pick up a water bottle was foreign to you. And I think one of the things that has been interesting is that you're totally an athlete where you can squat 475, but one of the things we ended up doing and training for was Alcatraz. And how somebody who could squat 475, now it wasn't all in the same time period, but it's amazing to think that those are the two same people who are doing those things.
Yeah, so Alcatraz is a medium distance triathlon. It's actually, I guess, closest to an Olympic distance triathlon.
Yeah.
So it's a 2.5 mile swim in the open ocean,
Yeah.
or actually with a current,
Yes.
which assists you a little bit.
Yeah.
Actually assists you a little bit, so it shortens. It doesn't feel like 2.5 miles.
Yeah.
But you got to time the current really well. Then it's 16 miles on the bike through the hills of San Francisco, which is a bear.
Yeah.
And then the run is like a 6 or an 8 mile run, but a good portion of it's on the beach through sand,
Yeah.
where you're just bogging down, and
Yeah.
then again, and then hills again.
Yeah.
And so it's not meant to be. It's not the marathon. I couldn't do an Ironman.
Yeah.
I'm just not. This is not the chassis to take out.
Yeah, no.
And run a marathon after being 100 miles on a bike.
Yeah.
But the Alcatraz is like very challenging but shorter, and that was more. I felt like I could accomplish that if I focused on it.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of an interesting thing because, to your point, I wanted to have a challenge, and so that's the one I picked. And then when I picked it, you were so instrumental in helping me prepare for it, because I dropped about 20 pounds.
Yep.
And that was a combination of muscle and fat. It wasn't just I didn't get shredded, ripped,
Yeah.
6-pack abs. I lost 20 pounds of everything
Yeah.
in order to be able to go up and down a hill on a bike.
Exactly, because when you're doing something like that, you don't need to be able to squat 300, 400 pounds. You need to be able to do your body weight over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you, I think one of the stories I loved was, there's the swimming, there's the running, there's the biking, and that's all very straightforward, and there's obviously some technical pieces to it. But one of the things that is the biggest adjustments for doing Alcatraz is the temperature of the water. And
I didn't follow your advice.
so one of the things I suggested was for you to swim in the winter, swim in your swimming pool without the heaters on.
Yeah.
And what did you think about that?
That was a humbling day. That was a very humbling day. So I'd been training at Solage's pool,
Yep.
which they kept 80 degrees all winter long.
Yeah.
And so, it's cold and you get in, oh geez, and then it's 80 degrees, and it's Olympic distance pool, you just cruise. And I got into our pool, which is, considerably shorter, and I actually set the temperature to heat it up to 55 degrees.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's no sense in this being colder than the ocean.
Yeah.
So I heated it up to 55 degrees. And the first time I went in to do this, you were here training Susan,
Yeah.
and I went into the pool, and after about 5 minutes, I had such an ice cream headache, I couldn't stay in the water.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I need a neoprene skull cap
Yep.
to protect my head, and this is brutal.
Yeah.
And so, there's a school of thought on this. There's two schools of thought on this. I did some research on it, and this one school of thought is take cold showers do the cold thing, and then the other is that it's going to be miserable either way. Just let it be miserable when you've got adrenaline going and you're swimming in Alcatraz. And so I did the latter. What I did was I wanted to be prepared.
Yeah.
So I did a couple of sessions in the pool here with the skull cap and the wetsuit, so I could knew what I was getting into.
Yep. And
then I drove down to San Francisco twice, and I did the distance in the sheltered cove that they've got. They've actually got I can't remember if it's called the Dolphin Club or the Olympic Club, but there's one that's right on the beach. I think it's the Dolphin Club, and they've got buoys set up for like a half mile.
Yeah.
So I could swim 2.5 miles and then get out of the water, and so I did that twice. So I had a confidence that I could do the distance in that temperature water.
Exactly.
And then I didn't. And then that was kind of my training. The interesting thing is that when you get in the ocean, in that they take these huge steamboats and they take all the furniture out of the steamboats and they load 2,000 people in the boat, and then they let the pros go first, and then you tell them how fast or slow you are, and they kind of try and time that so they don't have people crawling all over each other, and then you just like it's like stormtroopers on D-Day. You just jump off the boat into the water.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is that Alcatraz Island is there, and it's the cliff and then the prison.
Yeah.
And so you're staring up at the 40-foot walls of Alcatraz, going, holy Hannah. And the adrenaline's pumping so much that the water doesn't feel cold.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is the people that didn't prepare panic.
Yeah.
And so what's wild is that you're in the water with literally with 2,000 people, but immediately around you there's 200 people.
Yeah. And
out of those 200 people, 4 of them are panicking.
Yeah.
4 of them are just like, get me out of here.
Wow.
And so to kind of witness that, there's so many emotions, it's overwhelming, and the water doesn't feel cold because you're just jacked.
Yeah.
And then you start going, and then all of a sudden people start to spread out, and you're like, why is that guy going there? I think it needs to be here. What does he know that I don't know?
Yeah.
Am I fast enough to go with him? Or because if you're fast, this line will work.
Yeah.
If you're slow, this line means you're going to end up over here. So you better do this.
Yeah.
And so just picking that line with no experience is just, and I missed it. I went way a couple hundred yards. I had an extra quarter-mile run at the end of to get out of the surf.
Yeah, that's cool. Kind of coming back from Best Buy, and that's the headquarters is in Minneapolis,
right?
But we're sitting in California.
Yeah. So Susan and I are really blessed that both sets of grandparents loved taking the kids.
Yep.
So it was really easy to get them to say yes to taking the kids, to give us a weekend off as a couple. And so, and we didn't get a lot of that kind of time, as you can imagine.
Yes.
You have 4 kids and you're running your own business, so you're in the throes of it.
Yes, yeah, totally.
So our way of kind of staying connected was to, if I had a meeting in San Francisco, what we would do is I would schedule my meeting so it either started on Monday or ended on a Friday, have Susan fly in to meet me, and then we'd come up to Napa and spend a couple days in Napa and then fly home.
Yeah.
And so we could get 3 days together and basically only burn 1 day of vacation to do that. And so that got to be something that we did fairly often. And it was kind of interesting because this is about 2002, 2003, somewhere in there. My birthday is at the end of September. Yeah. And Susan's like, what do you want to do for your birthday? I'm like, I want to go to Napa. And we're like, we've been to Napa 5 times this year already. Yeah. It's heaven for a farm kid.
Yes.
Because at its core, it's still farming.
Yeah.
But it's incredible wines, beautiful food. We were learning so much about wine and about, at that point in time, we were just drinking from the fire hose and enjoying it to understand the wine side of things. And I think for us, when we looked at it, Susan's background is public relations and communications and design. Yep. And my background was in marketing. And so we never felt like we could be great winemakers, but we thought we could put together a great winemaking team,
Yeah.
and that our contribution could be to help tell the story.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, the wine is delicious, so that also helps really well too. And it's a beautiful property, and we're here right now is kind of part of the property. If you take all those experiences and you go from a corporate lifestyle, and obviously you're taking some of the corporate to the winery, but what are the things that if you're looking at yourself that you took from the corporate lifestyle that you brought to the winery?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is I think a lot of people that get into the wine business, whether they get in it as an owner or they get in it as somebody who is an estate host who sells wine, or even somebody who produces or makes wine, a lot of times people will do that. They'll make a lifestyle choice that they're going to come here and live here and find a way to make a living, which kind of turns into selling wine. And we came from a very goal-oriented, achievement-oriented background, and so we bring that to what we do here. Mandy Ackerman, our brand manager who runs all the sales stuff for us, she calls me the Viking surfer.
That's a good name.
And it's kind of like, we're going to have fun. This is going to be fun, but we're going to hit our number.
Yeah.
So just make sure you understand.
Yeah.
And so, you got to really, we all do this. We all have an internal monologue that helps us get through our day.
Yeah.
And if you're not performing at the level that allows you to be successful, you come up with all kinds of excuses inside your own head as to why that has happened.
Yeah.
And what you have to do is you reverse engineer it. We want to be here.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if we want to be here, what that means is we need this many appointments a week. We need this level of conversion on those appointments. We hope people will be excited enough to want to take an allocation. If they take an allocation and we treat them really well, they'll stay on for this many years. And so you build those steps, and then you manage each of those steps. We got a lot of appointments, but we're not getting sales. We're not talking to the right people.
Yeah.
We need somebody that can afford our wine.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And so, and so you just kind of manage each of those pieces, and you do it. And this carried over from Best Buy.
Yeah.
It's the greatest job in the world. We sell TVs and stereos.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Like you're going to go home happy.
Yeah.
Like something awesome is going to come through the door when you come back from Best Buy.
Yeah.
And it's going to make your life better, more fun.
Yeah.
Right. And so, in the same token here, we live in paradise.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. And so what we're really asking people to do is to showcase the wines and connect with the people who are coming here.
Totally.
And people come here to relax, and so they come and they leave all the stresses behind, and they get that aha moment, like, oh, my wife loves me. This is really nice. I can, she's smiling. What a great day. You know? And so you want them to connect with that, connect with the winery, and then allow them to have that experience when they go home, when they open a bottle of the wine.
Yeah.
Like the greatest gift of owning a winery is I get text messages and Facebook posts and Instagram posts, people opening our wine when they get family around the table. Nobody opens great wine for somebody they don't like.
Exactly.
Right? You open it for people that you love.
Yeah.
And so that's really the greatest treat of owning a winery, is seeing those photos.
I want to get to family in a second, but one of the things that I noticed that would happen to you within the winery is that, because generally some of the people who are coming to the winery often are successful or have the means to buy the wine. One of the things that I think happens a lot is that you get the question once they find out that you worked at Best Buy, how did you do it? and not even just how did you do it, is more in the sense of, and people ask, I think people ask me this, of like, how did you start your own business? How did you get the courage to do that? How did you, because it is a leap, a little bit of a leap,
right,
from somebody who doesn't know you,
right,
like to kind of make that pivot. So why did you make that decision? for family or whatever that was, and then how did you make that decision?
So, this happens all the time in a corporate world. The corporation has to decide a fork in the road. Are you going to go left or are you going to go right?
Yep.
Best Buy reached a fork in the road where it had 70% of the DVD business in the United States was done by Best Buy. We sold 70% of the DVDs because we had a whole deep catalog of all the movies, whereas Target and Walmart only had the top 20.
Yeah.
And we had 50% of all the music, and we had like 70% of like back catalog, Led Zeppelin, Fleetwood Mac,
Yeah.
whatever deep catalog stuff that's not in Target or Walmart.
Yeah.
We just dominated
Yeah.
it. So there was a moment where the company had to decide whether it was going to pursue a future of trying to be your smart friend, and as those things went from physical goods of CDs and DVDs to digital.
Yep.
Did we want to play a role in helping people collect and catalog those things?
Yep.
Or do we stay focused, laser focused on being a great retailer so that we can compete with and ultimately get the better of Circuit City and take their market share?
Yep.
And so the company came to a fork in the road, and it decided it was going to focus on taking market share from Circuit under traditional retail
Yeah.
and not focus on this other path. And Susan and I were very much aligned with this other path. And it gets to a point where if you're leading a large number of people and you don't believe in the central mission,
Yeah.
you can't lead with sincerity.
Yep.
And you got to go do something else.
Yeah.
And so we needed to go do something else. And Best Buy cast such a long shadow that most people just do something else in the ecosystem. They
Yeah.
start a rep company, or they import, stuff from China that
Yep.
sell at a Best Buy. Then you're still in the ecosystem.
Exactly. You're kind of using the same clout that you've gotten from working at
Right.
Best Buy, and use that same experience to do something within that.
We wanted something significantly different, and we'd fallen in love with Napa.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is that if you come to Napa, particularly 20 years ago, you come to Napa and you've got an eye for design like Susan does.
Yeah.
And you've got an eye for marketing and storytelling, and there were wineries out here that we admired their wines.
Yeah.
I always use the example. This is a fictitious winery, but it's a great example.
Yeah.
Oh, this wine's delicious. What's it called? Green Creek Winery. Why is it called that? Because we're next to Green Creek. What's that on the bottle? It's a picture of Green Creek. It's like, fabulous.
Wow, that's very deep.
Right. And so now you've got nothing, there's no story there, right?
Yeah.
So, for us, Fantesca is this female character that was in the Cirque du Soleil precursor plays called Commedia dell'arte. And she was described as sexy, smart, and unpretentious.
Yeah.
And so that's the brand.
Yeah.
And so now all of a sudden that's the story. And you don't have to be very observant to realize sexy, smart, and unpretentious applies to my wife.
Yeah.
So, and so you can kind of tell that story, and people can write themselves into that story.
Yeah.
And so you can share that.
Yeah.
And when you can share something beyond just the wine. We've all had the experience. You go to dinner, you have a great bottle of wine,
Yeah.
and by the time you get to the car, you can't remember the name of it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so thank God now we've got phones so we can take a photo of it. But if you have that experience where you loved a wine and can't remember the name of it, they didn't do a very good job of sharing with you how that wine came to be.
Totally interesting. So, I talked about you're on the board for X Prize, the innovation board. I also know that you guys you're very interested in the future of medicine and healthcare. You do a lot of charity work, and one thing I saw once you're how old are your kids now?
28 and almost 30.
So Taylor and then Chelsea. So it was interesting. I saw a shift and since we've been training for long, I've known them when they were in high school. So I've seen I saw a shift in you where almost once they got out of college, you're like, okay, the lens is open, now like that, it was kind of the Chris Rock, I'm not even gonna say the joke, but you keep certain people from doing certain things not the right way. Your kids, they went to great schools and have their own careers. And Chelsea is a budding winemaker herself, and she has a great brand, Fearless. So what shifted and opened your lens up to be even more in the foundation mode, the X Prize mode, and the future of medicine, healthcare? What kind of got you there?
You tapped into the headwaters of it. There's one of the things that as Best Buy did, very well financially, we did well financially with it, and you don't want that to ruin your kids or demotivate your kids.
Totally.
And so, we tried very hard to teach the kids that money is a tool.
Yeah.
And money is a tool that allows you to create the kind of life you want to have in terms of what you do. You're not defined by what you have. You're defined by what you do.
Yeah.
And I love the quote. There's the Rothschild family is a very successful family, had very little problems with people that just run off and want to live off their trust fund.
Yeah.
And the Rothschilds have a saying. They say, we have enough money, you can do anything you want. We just don't have enough money that you can do nothing.
Yeah.
And Susan and I are really proud that our kids are really actively engaged in their careers. They're actively engaged with their relationships. They're just really solid, good people.
Yeah.
And that's probably the thing I'm most proud of in my life.
Yeah.
So really great to see. But
Yeah.
you're right. They're in college and they're doing that college experience. They're never, they're doing great, so they're not coming home.
Yeah.
They're having too much fun on weekends to make it back to the house. And so all of a sudden, more time, more energy kind of opened up for Susan and I. And part of that we channeled into fitness and doing more with fitness. But we also wanted to kind of do some more things with philanthropy. And it was actually Taylor got an internship. He loves space and aerospace.
Yeah.
And so Taylor, in his passion, got an internship with a company called Planetary Resources. There was a bunch of jet propulsion laboratory guys that were looking at what would it actually take to be able to mine asteroids.
Yeah.
And so, it was kind of a hypothetical, but he went and contributed to that. And that introduced us to some of these people that are kind of in this X Prize space. And it's kind of, and it's about having an abundance mentality.
Yeah.
The news tries to trick you to watch more news. And
Yes.
the way they get you to watch more news is by picking on the part of your brain that deals with fear and anger.
Yes.
And so they want a perpetual conflict.
Yeah.
They don't want to, hey guys, today was a good day. Everything kind of, some good things happened. They don't want, that's not how the news goes. It's like, oh my God, this is going to happen. And
Yeah.
so they try and scare you. And what's interesting is that if you have an abundance mentality, if you look around, we've actually reduced wars in the last 20 years. We've completely transformed the continent of Africa in terms of average poverty level, subsistence poverty level. And birth rates have diminished tremendously in Africa because there's more access to healthcare, there's more access to birth control. Totally. And so the tale of the last 20, 30 years in the world has been dramatic improvements. And then you turn and you look at something like technology, like cell phones and like having the internet in the palm of your hand, unbelievable accomplishments. And we don't focus on that. So X Prize thinks in that way, but not only do they think about that way about the past, they think about that way for the future.
Yeah.
So that's what really kind of attracted us. And one of the things, we've looked at different things within X Prize. They've been great to expose us to a lot of different things like you think about the future with artificial intelligence, you think about it with cars. I'll give you a real quick example of the way to think about this. When cars drive autonomously, you don't need to have your hand on the wheel to drive the car. The car just drives itself.
Yeah.
What's kind of fascinating is that at that moment, you'll get in the car, you'll do something else while the car takes you to where you want to be.
Yeah.
Once the car drops you off, you're not going to need 10,000 parking spots in downtown San Francisco. That car can go out 15 minutes out to a suburb, park there, and then come get you when you need it. In fact, it doesn't even have to be the same car.
Exactly.
It could be a service that picks you up.
Yeah.
So the nearest one picks you up, not the one that's 20 miles away.
Totally.
And so when that happens, it's going to change the way we drive. It's going to change the way we plan cities.
Yeah.
It's going to change all these things. And so there's a tremendous advantage to being aware of those changes and thinking, 20
Totally.
years down the road in terms of how that landscape changes. One of those landscapes that we looked at was regenerative medicine. And so regenerative medicine is the medicine of your body has epigenetic switches. So you're having mutations in your system that would cause cancer when you're in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 60s. And then all of a sudden, your body doesn't have the ability to fight that off anymore.
Yeah.
And an epigenetic switch happens, and now all of a sudden you're susceptible to cancer. There's ways of actually changing or resetting that switch so that you don't get cancer.
Yeah.
There's ways of setting that switch so that your knee will regrow cartilage and you won't have osteoarthritis. Traditional medicine is cancer medicine.
Yeah.
Is oncology medicine is basically the cancer cells are susceptible. So if we stress the entire system,
Yes.
we'll kill the cancer cells and then you can recover. That's basically meanwhile, you're going to put all those drugs through your liver, through your kidneys. So it's very toxic. So there's a very complicated, long process to get through that. The epigenetic switches, the things that you can do in regenerative medicine, whether it's stem cells or what they're actually finding is the secretion of stem cells are called exosomes.
Yeah.
Those are what signal your body to do its own anti-inflammation and its own repair. So there's things like that are at the cutting edge of medicine that are going to transform our lives.
Yeah.
And what they do is they're going to increase not our lifespan, but our health span. So I think, nobody wants to live to 100 if it's 20 years of being bedridden with dementia.
Totally.
I don't want that. You don't want that.
Yeah.
What I want is I want to have 100 years of health and then a very rapid decline.
Yeah.
Or get trampled by elephants in Africa while I'm something epic like that. But at 100 years.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's kind of the goal of regenerative medicine. Isn't so much that we want you to live to 100. It's that we want your 80s and 90s to be incredibly healthful and allow you to do the things that you want to do.
Yeah, we've talked about it, and even I'm interested definitely in learning more about it and when we have those conversations, because I'm also trying to look in the future of where training is going and where's healthcare going and where's fitness can get to, and just be a little edge of the curve, a little head of it. If you got just a little bit of a head start on it,
right.
To wrap your head around it. I think, like you're saying, like if you know that cars are going to get to this place, it does help you think about, okay, what else will that change?
If you're 55 and your mental model is I'm going to get to 65 and retire, and I'm going to sit on a chair.
Yeah.
Man, I got news for you. I mean, if you don't work out and you don't eat right, that's what's going to be there for you.
Yeah.
If you exercise, if you eat right, if you educate yourself about things you can do to improve your body, if you think about this. I use my own parents as an example. My father knows more about how a furnace works than he does about his own body.
Yeah.
He expects his body to take care of him.
Yeah.
And so if you put in the work to understand what's available to help you, whether that's massage or yoga or working out or even supplements that might help you, you can have a much more active fourth chapter of your life.
Yeah, definitely. Wow. Is there anything you want to add? Any questions? This has been really, really awesome, kind of going through, getting through some of the stages, even getting some more details and stories I didn't know at the edge too.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I would want to do is just to you is to say thank you. You've made a lot of sacrifices to do this, and my family's got an extraordinary benefit from it. And I know you've covered this with Susan, but Susan's journey into lightweight bodybuilding, you had to learn with her. And you kind of went with her on that. And so you've been incredibly helpful and supportive, and we've become friends, and you guys have become a big part of our family. So
yeah, it's been, I think that one of the beautiful things, and I think you get some of this probably even more from the winery perspective, is that you get to really know people, and you get to connect, and you also find that we both learn as you become friends that how you can positively affect each other. So even information that you give me, we'll talk politics, and we'll also often get a different perspective, which is always great, because I love that aspect of learning. Actually, we'll end on this. Something that I think is interesting that you guys do, and now I'm kind of thinking of, we're kind of doing a little bit of the same thing, is don't want to make it too political, but one of the things that you guys do as a family is you sit down and you vote together. And so this past election in November in 2020, you guys sat down like you normally do, and you also involved, now you had a spouse, Todd, Chelsea's husband, and then you also had Taylor and his girlfriend, what's his girlfriend's name? Janez. And Janez's mom.
And Janez's mom.
And Janez's mom lives in LA, or
lives in LA now. Grew up in Baltimore.
Yeah, and so she grew up in the inner city, and so tell me where did that come from, and what's interesting when you guys all sit down together and do that?
So at some point, if you're take it seriously, you have to sit down and you have to understand what each of the propositions are, and kind of what they all entail. And Susan and Chelsea care about that, but they're not political junkies. They're not into it every day.
Yeah.
But they want to understand the issues at a thorough enough level to have an informed decision, an informed opinion when they vote on them. So what we do is we sit down as a family and we discuss what the propositions are, what they mean, what does the Democratic Party say is the good things or the bad things about this one. Not so much the Republican Party, but more the Libertarian Party. What do they think about it and say? And then we kind of go from there. Yeah. And I'm a more freedom, less government kind of guy. Yeah. And so I dislike most propositions, but because they're usually, what new rule should we pass?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's hardly ever about the new rule. It's more about letting the market dictate what should happen.
Totally.
So we had a great experience this year, because we're kind of working through these, and Taylor's girlfriend and her mom are on the phone with us, and we get to rent control.
Yeah.
And I think rent control is a terrible idea, because it disincentivizes people from building new housing.
Yeah.
So if you have more housing, the market will naturally bring prices down. When you rent control, you take away the incentive to build new housing, and you don't get enough housing.
Exactly.
San Francisco's put themselves in that position. And so I very cavalierly, we this is like Proposition 19.
Yeah.
So we get to 19, we've been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
And I kind of just casually blurted out, well, anyone who's ever had an economics course knows how to vote on this.
Yeah.
And Janez's mom was like, well, I actually live in a rent-controlled house, and it's the only way I can afford my home.
Yeah.
Okay, well, now this is a vastly different perspective on these two topics. And she shared a little bit about kind of her life and what and how rent control is a positive thing in her life.
Yeah.
And then she listened to me talk about how, from a system-wide standpoint, it can have a negative impact. And I came away with a more complete understanding of the issue. Yeah. And that's all we're trying to accomplish with that. And
exactly.
We don't tell. It would go very poorly for me if I tried to tell my wife or my daughter how to vote.
Exactly.
So it's really about just sharing information and then getting a better a better dialogue and then a better understanding of the issue when you do vote. And it's actually what I'm very hopeful for the country, because this, you're an idiot, you're a racist. This is not helping.
Yeah.
This is not helping.
No. And I think that was the beauty of it, is that and that's the discussions that we have, is like I can get those discussions with you when, different things happen within the country. And I think that's the beauty of, connecting through wine, connecting through fitness. So I want to thank you again for joining me. It was a lot of fun, and we'll see you next time. Bye.